Joe fans, Joe Motion Videos 82 here. If you recall from yesterday's review, I pointed out a mistake, if you would, on Lady J version 2, where her right foot had been bent in a little bit to as almost looking like a club foot. And it's been like that, obviously, since I've gotten her, and it's always bugged me. So I thought maybe it was a mold defect taken from the original mold. So after I purchased Lady J version 1, that was the first thing I looked at. And no, her leg is, pardon me, completely straight. So I'm thinking it was a factory defect, seeing that there were some QC problems that I had pointed out, that you know, giving her O-ring being tight, and it will tilt her body forward like that. Even if I move it back, it'll still tilt, and her torso doesn't fit into the waist piece. So obviously I'm using my short fuse here as a model for that. So one of my viewers, I want to thank you very much for this idea, Delvis78, a friend and viewer. He asked me to do, or suggested that I do a instructional video on boiling, and that's something I never even dawned on me to do, because I've never boiled an action figure. I don't have a taste for plastic, so wouldn't even think of cooking an action figure. You know, maybe a vehicle, you know, but never cook an action figure. So lame jokes aside, I thought that was a splendid idea. So I'm going to use this Frankenstein short fuse. When I got him in a bag of G.I. Joe junk, he didn't have his arms. And my wetsuit version 2 completely fell apart. I mean, he broke apart. It killed me, because I really liked wetsuit. And that was the first version I had of him. So he was the black plastic yellow gloved variant. So what I'm going to do is boil an arm and a leg to see what it does to the paint app, and to see if it'll soften up the plastic enough. Because that was something Delvis also pointed out. He said, I don't know what boiling will do with a paint app. So I am up to a scientific challenge. I really am. But to better understand the physics of boiling, or just the physics alone of a hot liquid, I thought I'd take this opportunity to share with you what is known as the Brownian movement. I used to teach respiratory therapy back in the early 2000s, and physics and chemistry was a part of our applied sciences, because we obviously deal with chemistry, giving medications, and also physics, but the physics of air movement. As what do respiratory therapists do? We pass gas, we administer oxygen, and we use compressed room air, which is 21% oxygen, by the way, if you didn't know that, to administer our breathing medications through a process called nebulization. The air blows through the little cup that we had the medication in, and it forces the medication through a spout, which strikes against a baffle, and it causes that to break up into particles, and you can breathe it in. They're 1 to 2 microns big. And just think of that like a mist or a liquid smoke. So that's how big those are. But I'm not going to get into that part. What I'm explaining is the Brownian movement. So what we have here is an illustration of a container holding water. And these are representation of water atoms. As we know, water is known as H2O, 1 part hydrogen, so you have 1 hydrogen atom, and see if I could do this, and 2 oxygen atoms attached to it. And
it kind of looks like Mickey Mouse.
And these oxygen atoms surround the hydrogen atom, and they kind of go in an ecliptic. So when something gets hot or cold, it's the reverse effect. When, let's say, a liquid gets hot, heat is applied, and these little atoms, they start getting excited. And these little bastards, bonk, 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 bonk. I apologize for the foul language, but this is how cool it is. It makes me want to use a little slang. They start bouncing around. Okay, they bounce around at a high rate of speed, and they bounce off of each other, bounce off the sides, and that's what creates the boiling process. This is the Brownian movement, named after the individual who discovered or figured that out, Professor Brownian. Or Professor Brown, and he's added kind of Latin thing to it, Brownian. So the water molecules, the water atoms just get excited, they bounce around up and down and bounce off of each other, and that causes the water to boil and heat. The exact opposite occurs when water gets cold. And these atoms, when they're warm, they're spaced further apart. Okay, they don't like to be near each other. But when it gets cold, just think of it as the atoms huddling together to stay warm. So the colder it gets, the closer they move together. And what happens when billions upon billions of water molecules form together? They form ice. It's how the freezing process. So, drop my pen cap, but think of hot, boil, cold, freeze. I hope that explains a little bit more. But to carry this just a little bit further, you could do the same with gases, with air. So oxygen, and also with liquid nitrogen, more people are familiar with liquid nitrogen. So you get the nitrogen gas, put it in your container. So nitrogen gases are all around. Boom, 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 boom. You apply thousands of pounds of pressure on that. So what happens when you apply all that pressure on these atoms? Well, they start bouncing off of each other, creating friction, creating heat, and that's going to make it boil. They don't want to do that. They want liquid nitrogen. So what happens? This gets, when the pressure is being applied, they also cool it, super cool it, flash freeze all of this, and that turns the gas into a liquid. And we all know liquid nitrogen. We see it in effects. We use it to make homemade root beer. We used it in science class as kids. You could buy it in a solid block known as dry ice. Why is it dry? Because it is just gas. And when it hits the atmosphere, it creates this cool little haze, that spooky fog that we see. And liquid nitrogen, I cannot remember exactly how cold it is, but it's so cold it'll burn your skin. And liquid nitrogen is used to freeze off warts, also to flash freeze any specimens that you need, but it damages the cells. It causes the cells to crystallize and fracture. So I can't get into cryogenics because I know very little about it. So we know that dry ice doesn't melt, but it vaporizes, turns back into a gas because it warms up and the atoms start moving around. The Brownian movement. So I just wanted to take that moment out to just educate you guys a little bit. As I was thinking about everything that Delva said, and I was watching a documentary on Pompeii, and I was like, you know what? Let's turn this into a teaching moment. So there you guys go. Word of the day, Brownian movement. There will be a quiz at the end of the week on this. I also want a 3-page report, double-spaced. Now, let's make it single-spaced. Make it a little bit harder. On Professor Brownian, or Professor Brown. Now, what we're going to do, though, is I'm going to sacrifice my buddy here. Short Fuze was my absolute very first G.I. Joe. A friend of mine gave him to me because he didn't like him. So I had everything on Short Fuze but the visor and his backpack, which had broken off. But so Short Fuze holds a special place in my heart. Not this one. He wasn't the original from when I was a kid. That one had been stolen from me, and the kid that stole him broke him into a bunch of pieces and gave him back. Oh, sorry, kind of thing. So it really cemented my disdain for bullies. So anyway, I will break Short Fuze apart. I'll boil some water, and we'll continue this lesson. But there is something I want to add. The Brownian movement doesn't only apply to water, to air, to gases. It applies to pretty much everything that has atoms in it. Plastic has atoms in it. So that's how plastic will melt. The atoms will get really super excited from the heat, and they will start to stretch out. They'll start to expand from one another. And that causes the plastic to become flaccid and shapeable. Like modeling clay, same thing. You freeze it, you can't move it, but it warms up. It becomes pliable. Wax is another great example of that. This is at a state of homeostasis. This is doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's at peace. It's happy. It's just chilling out. The atoms are just chilling out, happy in the space that they have. But I'm going to piss them off and stick them in boiling water. That would make me mad too. If I got stuck in boiling water, I wouldn't be very happy. And we'll excite these guys, and we'll see how we could mold these and shape them back. All right, so we're out here in my kitchen. I'm using a mess kit, pots from a mess kit, because I don't want to contaminate or potentially contaminate a good pot, cooking pot, because the oils and all the toxins that are in plastic, I don't want that to seep into my cookware and leave a bad taste behind, potentially poison my family. So let's not do that. So it's good to just designate a pot, or if you do stuff like this, designate a utensil for that purpose. And I put a lid on it, which I could feel it's already getting hot. I purchased this from a not a drugstore, jeez, a thrift store. So somebody by the last name of Larson donated it. So thank you, Mr. or Mrs. Larson, for donating that. When you put a lid on boiling water, that obviously holds in the heat, so it makes it boil faster. Just a little cooking tip for you guys too. So physics and chemistry also apply to cooking. All right, so I'm going to use a towel here and take the lid off. I don't know if you could hear that or not. But you see the water is starting to boil, and this has only been on for 3 minutes. All right, so my water is to a nice rapid boil. Let's go ahead, plop, plop. Let those guys go. I'm not really sure about how long to let those boil for, because they will eventually melt. Let's see. I'll leave them in there for like 2 minutes. Alrighty, 2 minutes is up on a rapid boil. Trying to fish them out here. Sorry about that. Where the little suckers at? Okay, got the arm. Sorry, trying to keep that in frame for you. And the leg. Alright, so I know it's hard to see that, but let's move it over here to the light. So they're sitting in my pan here. We'll give it a few minutes to cool, not minutes, but several seconds to cool down. Okay, here we go. You can see the arm is badly, the color is badly damaged. It cooled off relatively fast. Plastic is soft, and yeah, it could be shaped. What I would suggest or think about doing is kind of ruin the paint app on his boot, but we'll have to see after it cools down a little bit more. Okay, so 2 minutes on a rapid boil allowed me to move the wrist, and I could see how that would work. If you mold it, bend the wrist in, or whatever you're trying to do, bend it into the shape you want, then you would have to splint it in that position, so when it cools, it will stay in that fixed position. So with the leg, it's obviously thicker, denser plastic. You want to boil it longer. That is up to you. I would just say boil it for like 4 or 5 minutes. This is what I would do. I just want to let you guys know I'm not taking any responsibility for anything getting screwed up. This is just an experiment. Kind of give you guys something to go on. It's not an exact science. It's okay. This is just a trial and error kind of thing, like the light bulb when it was invented. So you want to boil this, let's say, for instance, 5 minutes. And you pull it out, and the plastic's pliable, good. If not, boil it a little bit longer until it gets to the softness that you are looking for. So I don't think I will do that with Lady J, because she is made out of black plastic, and this is still it ruined the color, faded the color a little bit on the black, so that tells me not to do it on black plastic. But as far as the paint goes, you know, it didn't do much for the paint, but that was just at a 2-minute boil. And it did, can't speak today. It did change the color a little bit on the green plastic. So use at your own discretion. I would say if you're going to repaint it for a custom piece, just go for it. Okay, you're going to paint it the way you want it to be painted. But if you're trying to restore a piece like I was thinking about doing with Lady J, no, I won't take a chance, because that's the only one I have. And I'm just not going to do it. It's not that important to me. It's just a minor irritant. So there you guys have it. Delvis, thank you so very much for spawning this idea. I really appreciate that suggestion. I hope you guys appreciated this video and got a little something out of it. I know I learned something from it, just about the nature of plastic, and you know, the decolorization of it, and that also ties into chemistry. So some of the chemicals leached out of it, and that's why I don't want to use a standard cooking pan. The mess kit pan, that's fine. It's no big deal. I spent 75 cents on the whole thing at the thrift store, and if that's ruined, you know, pitch it or just use it for crafts. That's better than wasting it. Just use it for a craft ideas, boil or to melt wax and things. I like to make candles every once in a while too. So anyway, thank you guys very much. Thank you for tuning in. And to my new subscribers, thank you guys very much. Please check me out on Patreon. Leave me a one-time tip on coffee if you so choose to. And also, guys, let's keep the folks in California in our hearts and prayers. They really need it. The town of Paradise is almost completely obliterated. So let's go ahead and give those guys a little help if you can, even if it's just in a prayer. Prayer is powerful. I attest to that. I think that's really what saved my life when I got sick, prayer and faith. So if you can contribute a little bit of money to them through the Red Cross, that would be great. Like I said, it's completely up to you how you choose to support them. So this has been Joe Motion Videos 82 signing off. You guys have a great day. Stay kind to each other. Be nice to animals. Get them spayed and neutered if you so choose to. Thank you, Bob Barker, for that little line. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.